While some violent crimes like murder and rape have decreased in Buffalo this year, robberies in the city have increased a whopping 41%. Some neighborhoods seem to be easy targets for thieves and muggers who prey on Buffalo's helpless citizens. Tonight, Rich Newberg begins a series examining the impact of violent crimes in human terms.
There was a time when Norfolk Avenue, off East Delavan, used to be a peaceful, safe place to live. But not anymore, say neighbors. John Winters, 85 years old, is no longer safe in his own home. He was mugged twice in his house during the past month.
They get a little impatient when they keep asking you, where's the money, where's the money, where's the money, where's the money? It's the same damn thing over and over.
Mr. Winters lost his wife years ago. His neighbor checks up on him when she can, and so do police. But at the time he was mugged, he was alone.
He was a strong guy. He picked me up bodily and put me down. And I weigh 170 pounds.
Police say the attack on Mr. Winters is typical of how young thugs prey on older retirees.
Well, I think there's a need for people to realize that the first of every month and the middle of every month, you've got a certain population that's going to come into some money. He's on a fixed income, everybody's aware of it, and we have a certain segment of our population that simply takes advantage of that fact. And in his particular case, he's hard of hearing and he lives alone.
Thieves strike in the city against all age groups. 22-year-old Brian ECKENRODE had all his stereo equipment ripped off, along with his guitar and banjo, and even his telephone. He's a college student paying for his education with loans. He has no insurance.
Now you look at it, and there's really, if someone wants to get into your place, there's nothing you can do. There's really nothing. Unless you wire everything up all around your house.
Yes, who is it?
It's the police, Miss Montello.
Camille Puntillo, the neighbor who looks after John Winters, has wired up her home. She's wired it, caged and bolted its doors, barred and locked its windows, and asked police not to forget her. Her home has been burglarized twice this year. How much have you spent on security?
Well, with doors and all the carpenter work and everything, I'd say about $3,000. With, all of that.
Why did you spend so much?
Well, to protect myself.
Do you ever get the feeling that you're a prisoner in your own home?
I feel safer with all the money that I spend. I don't feel as though I'm a prisoner, but I mean, I am cautious at times, especially late at night if I hear noises or anything like that around, you know.
It was only about 2 weeks ago, across the street on Norfolk, when 21-year-old Timothy Beeks was murdered. His sister was shot in the hand as her 6-year-old boy witnessed the killing. Later, the father of the child turned himself in. 2 months ago on Norfolk, a police officer was crushed against a tree trying to arrest a suspect in connection with a mugging and robbery. There were shots fired. The mugging victim was a 77-year-old man, savagely beaten on the face and head at Delavan and Bailey. 3 men were ultimately arrested.
There's been a terrible increase in violent crimes here.
Why the increase? Do you have any opinions about it?
Well, I think the economic situation, there's no jobs. A lot of kids drop out of school, they can't find jobs. People that have gone to school can't find jobs. I think that's the majority of the problem,
Tomorrow night, the latest in surveillance techniques designed to catch a thief in the act. Rich Newberg, News 4, Buffalo.
In some parts of Buffalo, running a business at night means running a high risk of becoming a victim. Tonight, in part 2 of his series On the Fringe of Violence, Rich Newberg reports on how some businesses are coping.
John Martell manages an NSI gas station on Bailey Avenue. He became a crime statistic on Good Friday when he was mugged while making a routine business night deposit outside the bank. His station has been held up 5 times since November. He now requires a police escort to complete his business day.
I was just about to deposit the money in the bank right here. They turned around, they said, hand over the money. Before I could turn around, the guy hit me across the face, right across here, broke my nose, and I had 3 stitches in my eye.
Radio Shack is a few doors away from the gas station. Thieves have invaded this store 8 to 10 times since Christmas. Manager Michael Smith has lost count. Most of the anti-burglary devices don't seem to be able to stop the break-ins.
Starting at about roughly last fall, we've been robbed about 8 or 10 times, mostly through the windows. If you look on the roof up there, there's a hole in the roof, too. That was the first robbery back then that came through the roof.
What happened here?
Well, evidently what had happened was the culprits had backed a truck right through the windshield and knocked out the 3 braces here and lowered the tailgate and just helped themselves to the goodies on the inside. Then they just drove off.
Radio Shack now has hidden microphones connected by telephone lines to a system known as Sonatrol.
Good evening, Sonatrol.
At Sonatrol's headquarters, Radio Shack is one of about 750 Buffalo area businesses and homes monitored for sound.
We're about to hear a typical smash and grab burglary at an electronics store.
That you picked up on your system?
That's right. We're now hearing the glass breaking in the front of an electronics store in the South Towns. We are hearing 2 burglars because they're talking. You hear them entering the store. They're selecting the merchandise that they had previously chosen, and now you hear them walking out of the store because of the footsteps on the broken glass. And now you can hear their car driving away.
Last year, our system resulted in 195 apprehensions in the greater Buffalo area. That was a savings to the taxpayers of over $600,000. That figure comes, Rich, from the FBI statistics, where they feel that every apprehension that's actually made at the scene saves the taxpayers of that community $3,300.
But just how safe is it in the city of Buffalo? Tomorrow night, we'll take a look at the statistics and the effects of the police slowdown. Rich Newberg, News 4 Update.
Every day in Buffalo, somebody is victimized by violent crime. City officials point to a leveling off of the violent crime rate, but as Rich Newberg reports in Part 3 of his series, the figures are still rather startling.
Based on the latest yearly crime statistics, an average of 5 people a day are robbed in the city of Buffalo. 4 people a day are assaulted. In the course of a week, 5 or 6 women are raped, and at least 1 person is murdered. Police will tell you the criminal element is more violent than ever.
We live in a violent times, Rich. There's no question about that. People out on the street, we every day encounter young punks, criminals who think nothing of stabbing, shooting, beating people that are helpless. We found many cases where young men would knock a woman down to the ground, kick her while she was lying on the ground. We found elderly men being beaten by young people who punched them until their face looked like a piece of hamburger. We know all these things are happening.
This is 911. Can I help you?
Emergency calls to 911 have increased 13% so far this year. The caseload for detectives has increased almost 23%. With this increased caseload and the number of violent crimes in Buffalo showing no great decrease, we might expect the arrest rate to climb a bit. But this hasn't happened, because these aren't normal times. Tensions between the city and its police department over the police contract led to an alleged police slowdown last summer, and the number of arrests seemed to reflect that tension. Overall arrests are down about 36% compared to last year at this time. Arrests by patrolmen for lesser street and traffic crimes are down 48%.
Admittedly, we've been way off in the number of traffic summonses. And again, when you're talking about arrests, the traffic summonses are what bring the arrest rate down. But as you know, when they had the slowdown, and let's face it, everybody knows that in the area of traffic, and I keep repeating that over and over, that there was no slowdown affecting the crime in the city of Buffalo.
The purpose of this series is not to frighten, but rather to inform. Tomorrow night, we'll show you how some communities have banded together to help police in fighting crime. Rich Newberg, News 4 Buffalo.
With an average of 9 violent crimes occurring every day in the city of Buffalo, communities are beginning to fight back. And as Rich Newberg reports, people living on the fringe of violence can turn things around.
They have to be willing to help themselves. When the police see somebody helping themselves, we, of course, have to help them.
Officer Ralph Gaines has seen the changes in the Linwood-Oxford section of the city, a neighborhood where some residents living there for 20 years didn't know their next-door neighbors. But that has all changed now because of the work of these people who went door to door and found that the fear of crime was a common denominator in the neighborhood.
If anything has happened with the association, I have telephone numbers and names of everyone on the block. I make contact with them through phone. door to door.
If neighbors take care of themselves, then the job of the police is easier. So the liaison between the officers and this community becomes even more easier.
When the criminals see that people are looking out of their windows and they're taking care of their neighbors, somehow the burglars seem to stay away. You don't find so much narcotic activity or other illegal activities around because they know that people are watching.
Contrast the spirit here with the one on Norfolk Avenue in the 16th precinct, following a rash of muggings, rapes, and robberies, and a homicide.
Half the time, I'm scared to go to my door. I always look out. With the neighbors, they're pretty much, everybody on the street sticks to themselves, except for a couple of families here.
Well, the only thing that bothers me, the neighborhood was very peaceful years ago. But in the last 5 years, it's rotten.
Police say better street lighting on Norfolk would help, the kind of lighting the folks in the Fillmore-Leroy section of the city have been successful in getting. It's 10 o'clock at night right now, pitch black outside of this parking lot. But as you can see behind me, sodium vapor lights are making it almost like daylight here. Communities want this kind of light because it helps prevent crime.
A lot of people that I've asked since the installation in March of the street lighting, they feel a little more secure when they're coming from the corner store or the corner tavern, whatever it might be. If they're using the community center or going to bingo or church at night and they're walking home, they feel a little sense of security with a little more brightness in the neighborhood.
On Brunswick, we also found an active block club and concerned neighbors who help one another. It is happening in many neighborhoods, and it is bringing people closer together, people who live on the fringe of violence. And I would like to personally thank Precinct 16 Police for their cooperation in this series. They have a tough job trying to keep the streets safe. If more neighbors would get to know one another, look after each other, police say they could make a real dent in crime. John?